In this tutorial, we're going to give you a detailed overview of how you can create text and look at all the options we have available for you to edit it. To get started, let's create a new file. This is going to be a single-sided job, and for this demonstration, we're going to create a job space that's 20 inches by 20 inches by 0.5 of an inch. Our 0 position will be set at the top of our material. Our XY datum will be the bottom left-hand corner, and then we're going to click OK. Now let's have a look at the text creation and editing tools that we have available in the software. To access the tools, you need to be on the Drawing tab. Under the Create Vectors section in this tab, you'll see a whole line of tools dedicated to text creation and editing, and these are them right here. The first one is Draw Text. Then we have Draw Text within a vector box. We have Edit Text Spacing and Curve. We've got Convert to Curves. And we also have Text on a Curve. Let's first look at the Draw Text option. As soon as the Draw Text tool opens up, you'll see all the different options we have for this tool. And also you'll see in the job space that you have, there'll be a rectangular box. And this rectangular box indicates the size of your text and the location of where the text will start to appear. And the blue dot in the bottom indicates the text alignment that you've chosen for this particular piece of text. Now to get started, we can simply either start to type right in our text box over here, or we can right click and paste text from some other source that we may have decided we'd like to copy and paste text from. For now, we're just going to type in the word Vectric, all in uppercase. Now in some of our text boxes or text fields in our software, spelling errors or words that the software feels are spelt wrong will be underlined in red. In this case, it's spelled correctly, but maybe we want to add it to our dictionary. So let's right click on that and go down to Spell Checker. And below the Add Word option, you'll see any of the words that our software feels the misspelt word could be. But in this case, I just want to add the word to my dictionary. And as soon as I do that, you'll see that now the word is not underlined in red anymore. And any time in the future I type that in, then it will appear to be spelled correctly without the red line under it. Now, if I want to remove that from my dictionary, I just need to select the text, right click on it and go down to Spell Checker and click Remove. And then from here on out, that word will be underlined in red. So let's just go ahead and double click on that again, right click on it, go down to Spell Checker, and we're going to add that word back to our dictionary. So from here on out, it won't be underlined in red. Any text that we type inside this box will appear in our job space based on the location of that rectangular box that we saw a minute ago, using all of the settings that are currently selected in our Create Text dialog. If for some reason you find this text input box a little cramped, you can go ahead and click the larger edit button here, and it'll bring out a much larger window in the center of your job space for you to do your text editing in. And of course, the spell checker works here as well. We can just click OK. Below that, we have the option of choosing our font type, either TrueType fonts or single line fonts. TrueType fonts are the fonts that got installed with your Windows operating system, or maybe you've downloaded off the internet and installed yourself. If you'd like more information on how to install fonts into your operating system, please have a look at your Windows help file. The single line fonts are ones that we would have given you with your software and are great for doing engraving with, and we'll touch on that in a minute. Below that, you have your font, and this is the font that was selected last time around when I created some text. If I go ahead and choose this drop-down arrow, you'll see that I have a list of all of my fonts that have been installed in my Windows operating system, and I can use this little dragger here to drag through my full list of fonts. I can also go ahead and use my scroll wheel to move through that if I'd like to. Now with that font selected and the list of fonts collapsed, I can use my cursor keys on my keyboard to move through the fonts, and you'll see how my text in the 2D view is being updated with the font that I choose inside of my text box. These happen to be all horizontal fonts or vertical fonts, and then we get into the other fonts here now. If I want to, I can also use my scroll wheel at this point, and you'll see again, I'll be going through those fonts one at a time, and I get that visual indication of what my text is going to look like if I choose a particular font. And if I happen to know the first letter of the font that I'm looking for, I can just press it on my keyboard. So for example, I can press I on my keyboard and it'll bring me straight to Impact. And also if I use my drop down, you'll see that all of my fonts that start with I are listed below that. Now it's important to note that if you go to the very top of your list of fonts, the first 5 fonts are going to be ones that you've used previously with your software, or the last 5 fonts that you've used. And so you'll see that at the very top of your list. Now you can adjust the number of fonts that will show up inside of your settings of your software if you'd like to increase that or decrease that. Now let's have a look at the single line fonts. And you'll see that we have a list of single line fonts that came with your software. And these are special fonts. Single line fonts are great for when you are using a conical engraving tool, as you can create a profile toolpath which goes down as deep as you specify along a vector, producing a fast and efficient way for production of text for engraving purposes. For now, we're going to go back to our 2-type fonts and to the Impact. And then cursor down once to Cambria. Of course, I can go ahead and make my font bold. I can make it italics. Or I can make it bold and italics at the same time. I have the option now of changing my text alignment. And again, as we mentioned before, this little blue dot will indicate what it's currently set to. And the blue dot is in the center of my text element here, so it's set to center. I can go left, and I can go right, and go back to center again. Now the blue dot will be aligned with my anchor point that's at the bottom here, and currently right now it's set to 10, 10. I can also go ahead and type in a new text height if I'd like to. So let's go to 3, and you notice that dynamically in my 2D view that text gets changed. I can also go ahead and use my transform handles in the 2D view. So by hovering over one of these corner handles, I can hold down my shift key and click my button, click my left button, and I can drag it bigger or smaller if I would like to. And while we're here, I'd also like to point out that I can grab this little blue handle in the corner and I can rotate this around. And with that text rotated at whatever angle I choose, if I add in another word up here, it follows the same angle as my original text did. I can just delete that out of there and press delete. And I'm back to the regular text again. Now I can use Control Z to undo any changes that I've made. And let's go back and change this text back to 3. Now, of course, I can go ahead and change my anchor point if I'd like to. I can go down to 1, 1 if I'd like to, or I can go back to 10, 10 if I'd like to. Now, as mentioned before, when we started up the Draw Text dialog or the Create Text dialog, that rectangular blocks showed up in the center of our job space. Now, that was based on the settings I had last set up here. If I'd like to go ahead and start a brand new text element, I can just go ahead and click anywhere in my 2D job space, and you'll see that I have a new text box set up with the blue dot, and all these settings are the same as what I had before, but with a new anchor point at the bottom. So for now, let's just go ahead and click close. Now, because we created this text element with our Draw Text tool, then our software, remember, that's what it is until we decide to convert it maybe to curves for some further customization. But for right now, it's still a text element. So if I select it and I go back over to our Draw Text tool, you'll see that the dialog remembers what the settings were when we created that particular text. We have the Vectric text, we've got the font listed, we have the size of it and its anchor point. Now, if we'd like to, we can go ahead and make some edits to this. We can type in the word software, and you see how it adds it to it down there. We can go ahead now and change our font back to Impact if we would like to. We can change the size if we want to, and so on. And then we can close it down once we're happy. And again, to reiterate that, the software will always consider this a text element until we decide to convert it to curves, and we'll get to that a bit later. But for now, let's just go ahead and select that text, press delete on our keyboard, and move on to the next option here, which is Draw Text within a vector box. Of course, before we can use this tool, we're going to need to have a vector box. So let's go up here to our Draw Rectangle tool and click on that. We're just going to create one that's going to be 16 inches by 6 inches in height, and then we can click Create. And there we have our rectangle right there. Let's close this down and let's select that and let's press F9 on our keyboard to center that. Now with that rectangle selected, we can jump right into our draw text within a vector box tool. Click that. Now this looks just like the draw text dialog with a few exceptions, and we'll go over that in just a second. So first of all, we need to enter in some text. So let's type in Vectric software for CNC. And you'll see that while I was typing that in the 2D view, the software made that fit to the boundary box that we had chosen. So it actually scaled it down to fit with inside of that based on the criteria that we have selected below. Now, as with the other form, this is the same information that would have been here when I either last created a auto text layout, or if I had selected text that I used this option to create, then it would remember the options from that. I can go ahead now and choose a true type font or a single line font. I can go ahead and choose the font I'd like to have from the list if I'd like to. I can go ahead and use my scroll wheel to go through those if I want to, and it'll update automatically in my 2D view. Or I can go ahead and use my cursor keys and do the same thing, or I can press a letter on the keyboard like T to bring me to the T's, so I can go ahead and select Times New Roman. And that looks great. I could choose bold, italic, or both bold and italic. I can choose if I want to align my text to the left inside the box, to the center of the box, or to the right of the box. We'll go back to the center. I can go ahead and adjust the bounding box dimensions if I wanted to. I'm not tied to this 16 by 6 box that I started with, so I could change this to be 10 if I would like. And you'll see how the software now has given me a new bounding box and stretch the text to fit. But for right now, we'll put that back to 6. I can choose a margin size, and the margin size is going to be the space between the outside of my bounding box and my text within the shortest dimension of my rectangle in this case. So it's going to be decided by this distance here, not this distance over here. So for now, if I choose none, you'll see how the software pushes our text right out to the edge of that bounding box. Normal is like that, and then wide, of course, is super wide. Let's go back to normal. Now we have these two options down here that we can go ahead and choose how we would like to have our text stretched to fit inside that bounding box. I have two options here for vertical, which is space lines to fit or stretch characters. And right now I'm happy with the way it fits, so I'm not going to try either one of those. But horizontal stretch, there is some room for improvement here. I could stretch this out to the end of this box a bit better. So let's have a look at that. So I could choose to stretch out the spaces, change the kerning, or stretch the characters. Okay, for now, we'll just go back to none. Now we had already had a bounding box set up that we'd asked the tool to pick up the dimensions for, but what if we didn't have a bounding box? Then I can show you what would happen with that. If we just click out in the white space, you'll see that automatically the software has picked up 20 by 20, which is the size of my job space. So you don't necessarily need to have a box selected. If you didn't have one, then it would just go ahead and treat your job space as the bounding box. Let's go back to this text just for a second. Now you may have already noticed already that this would be a perfect tool for creating a sign, a customized sign, where you might have a specific area where you need to have the text fit, and you could create an actual bounding box to contain your text within, no matter how long the name or the word was. This would also be great for engraving plaques as well. Anyway, for now, let's just go ahead and click close, and we'll delete that. The next tool we're going to want to look at is the Edit Text Spacing in Curve. But before we can do that, we need to start out with some text. So let's go ahead and draw some text. And we're going to start with Vectric, and another line, software. Actually, let's make this lowercase. And let's change this font to Times New Roman. And let's close that down. And with that selected, let's press F9 on our keyboard and center that. And now we can have a close look at this font. So the way the software creates text is all down to the rules of the individual fonts. So you may find that the spacing between each of the characters isn't always equal to each other, and that's down to how the font was created. Also, sometimes we need to adjust the spacing between the lines of text. We can do both of those and much more with this tool. With that bit of text selected, let's go over here to our Edit Text Spacing and Curve, and we'll select that. Now, as we hover over top of the font, you're going to see that our cursor is going to change and give us different options, different things that we can do in different areas where this font lies. So between our letters, you'll see that we have a V and an A, and then two carets pointing towards the middle. So if I click my left mouse button, the space between the letters is decreased. If I hold down my Shift and do that, the spacing is increased. Now if I'd like to go ahead and make larger increases or decreases in the spacing, I can hold down my Control key and I'll get much bigger steps. So again, that was my Control key held down, my left mouse button. If I hold down the Control key and the Shift key and my left mouse button, I get larger steps separating those letters. And I can go along and slowly increase or decrease the amount of space between the letters to make sure that they are going to be cut properly and they look right when they're cut. For instance, right here at the bottom of the R and the I, they're a little tight and we may end up having a bit of a problem when we cut those. So to add a little extra space in there might make it look a little bit better. And again, decreasing the space here might help as well and make it look a little bit better. And you can work through those as you go. Now, if I decide to hold down my Alt key while doing the clicking, the left mouse button clicking, you'll see that it applies that to all of the letters in that line of text. So again, if I hold down my Alt key now and my Shift key, you'll see that it adjusts the spacing to all the letters. So if I get it, the individual letters spaced out properly and I want to then go ahead and increase or decrease it between the whole set of letters, then I can go ahead and use that option. There are spaces like here as well that we might want to decrease a bit and so on. Now you'll find with fonts with serifs, sometimes the serifs will get kind of close together and it's a good idea to kind of reduce that or increase that depending on what you're going to be doing. And that looks pretty good. Now between the lines, I can do the same thing. I can click, left click, and that will go ahead and bring my lines of text closer together, or I can hold down my Shift key and push them farther away. It all depends on what I'd like them to look like. And that looks okay. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, next thing we can do is we can go ahead and right click on our text and we can break our text block into lines. So what it will do is it will take those two lines of text and now create two individual lines of text for me. These are still being treated as text elements, so I can go ahead and do all of the editing that I could do before, but now it's just down to the one line at a time. Now you'll notice that now that I've done this, when I select my text, I get three new handles here. I get one to help me transform, so I can go ahead and move around my text if I want to. Let's just undo that. And I also have these two green handles here. If I hover over the top one, you'll see there's an arc with an arrow pointing up. If I hover over the bottom one, there's an arc and pointing down. If I go ahead and grab the arc that's pointing up and I drag upwards, you'll see that my text is now being placed on an arc or a curve. And I can move right down till it's flat again, and I can do the same the other direction. For now, we're just going to bend it up like this for now. And with it bent, I can go now and I can readjust my text spacing on that line to be what I'd like it to be so that it looks correct. And that looks pretty good just like that. Now you also see we have some other handles that are showing up here. We have a red and a blue handle. If I grab the red handle, I can slide the text around the center point. Center point is down here of that circle. And if I choose the blue handle, what I can do is I can move it in closer to the center point, to the point that it's actually wrapping it around a full circle, which is pretty handy. Now, even though we decided to do that, I can, with that text selected, I can go back to my text editing and I can add in another bit of text if I'd like to. And you'll see how it then stretches that all around the curve. And I can delete that out of there and then go back to the way it was. So the next tool we're going to look at is going to be Convert to Curves. So currently right now, our software text is a text element, so we can edit it just like any other text. But let's say we wanted to make the S bigger or make a modification to one of the letters to create a logo. Well, to do that, we're going to need to convert this over to standard vectors. So to do that, we'll need to have our text selected and then go ahead and convert that to curves. Now, once we do that, we can't go back to edit the text anymore because it's not text. So we can't change the spelling, we can't change the font, we can't add more text to it, we can't change the kerning between the letters, at least using the tool that we just saw a second ago. So now we have to go in and use our traditional drawing tools. So for instance, if I wanted to take the S, I could go ahead and select it and I could scale it up if I wanted to. Now, during that conversion to curves, we've also broken up letters like the O into two different curves, and same with the A and the E. So you might want to keep that in mind. If we did want to scale up all of the E, we need to make sure that we had all of its bits selected, and then we could go ahead and do that if we wanted to. Now, also, if we want to go in and maybe make the tail of this T a little bit longer, we can go in and treat this just like a regular vector. We can go right into node mode by pressing N on our keyboard. We could select all of those nodes and we could just drop that T down if we wanted to give it a very stylized look. And that looks really good. Now, if we ever did want to go back into our regular text mode with this particular piece of text, then we have to undo all the things that we just did. And to do that, we can just go over here and simply click through the undo options until we get to the point where we have put this back together. And that should be right. And I can tell because when I go to click on that, because I had my node editing tool up, it's going to say that I cannot edit this in node mode because it's actually a text element. And I have the option now, if I'd like to go ahead and convert this to curves if I want. But for now, I don't want to do that. I want to leave it as a text element. So I can just go ahead and select no. And as you see, if I go back to my pick tool, I can select that and I can go back in and edit this as normal text like we always could do before. Some of the functions in the software require us not to have overlapping vectors, and this is especially true when it comes to toolpaths. However, sometimes this cannot be helped and it can be down to the type of font that we'll be using. For instance, if we change the font that we used for the word software to something like brush script, and then we size that up to be a little bit bigger so we can get a closer look at it, close this down. We can just zoom into it. You'll see that in order for this to look like a continuous font, the letters actually overlap a little bit. In this example, the font we have has tails going to and from the next character, and this is where the overlapping can become quite a problem. And there are things in the software that we can do to overcome this issue, looking at converting to curves and working with individual vectors. Now, for some toolpaths, such as vcarving, the toolpath strategy deals with this sort of issue internally to make the font look like it is continuous. Although it does a very nice job, some things may need your attention and will need to be dealt with in a different manner. We could look at welding the font together so that we get one continuous vector and then editing it to fix all the little issues. So with that selected, we're just going to go over and weld our text together. And it's going to come up with this little dialog that says some objects, such as text or distorted objects, are converted to curves for this operation. Would you like to replace or keep the original vectors? Sometimes you will want to keep the original vectors, but in my case, I'm going to go ahead and replace them. Now you'll note that traditionally with a weld, any internal vectors will be removed. In this case, the software knows it's a font, and so it leaves those behind for us to go ahead and use. So if we now go into node mode, we'll see we have all of the nodes selected. Now, one of the trouble spots I mentioned to you earlier would be here, between where the A and the R come together in software. You'll see there's a bit of a jaggy step here, and we can go ahead now, and in node mode, we can go ahead and fix that. Where if we had gone directly into vcarving this font, the software wouldn't have fixed that for us. And now it's nice and smooth, like it should be. And it looks really good. Now let's have a look at the last text editing tool we have here. It's text on a curve, wrap text along a curve. So what we're going to do is we're going to press F on our keyboard to zoom all the way out. We'll go back to our pick tool here and we'll select all of this text and we'll delete that out of there. Now it makes sense that if we're going to wrap text to a curve, we're going to need some text. So let's start off with some text and we'll make that the word software. Okay, and we'll change the font to be Arial. That looks good. And then we're going to size it down to be 2 inches. That looks pretty good. And we'll close this down. And then we'll just move that somewhere up here for now. Now we're going to need a curve. So let's go ahead and draw a quick curve here. From here to there, to there, to there. That's great. We can just click out of that now. And we have our curve. Now let's select our text. Hold down our Shift key and grab our curve and then choose to wrap that text. You'll see we have all kinds of options here in our text on a curve form, and we'll start at the top and work our way through them all so you can see what they do. So first of all, we're going to look at the text size section. So right now we've told it to maintain our original text size, which is what it's done. But we can also choose to scale the text if we would like to fit the curve. So right now it's set to 100%. So the text has been scaled so that it fits all the way to the end of both points of this curve. And we can use the slider to control how small we'd like that to get. We can go back up until we're happy with the placement of that text. And you'll see that sometimes it makes sense to go a little bit smaller because your kerning gets fixed. But we can edit that again later on if we'd like to. But it's nice to know we have this option to kind of tweak everything. For now, let's go back to our maintain text size. And we can also go ahead and change the spacing, which may help again in trying to get those letters spaced out so they look correct. And if we're happy with whatever we choose, we can just leave it there, or in my case, I'm going to put it back to none again and leave it there. Now for text position, we have these 3 nice little icons here that tell you exactly what they're going to do. So right now our text is above our curve. We can place the text on a curve, and we can place our text below a curve. We can place our text on the other side if we'd like to. Let's go back to above a curve right now. And we can also select a offset distance. So I can make this 1/4 inch, and you'll see what'll happen when I press the space bar is it will space my text off that curve by 1/4 inch. Let me put that back to 0 for now. I also have text alignment, and again we've got the 3 pictures here so we can see what's going to happen. We can go left. You'll see that it scoots all of our text to the far left. We can go to the far right, or we can go to the middle. And you see we have the blue dot here that tells us what end of the line we'll be using. So for instance, within the middle, I can grab that and I can slide it along if I'd like, or I can put it to the left and I can slide it where I'd like it to fit. And this gives us a lot of control of where our text will fall on a particular curve. And then we can also tell the software how we'd like to align each letter to the curve. So in this case, we can align it to the curve so it follows the shape of the curve, or we can make it vertical right off of that. And again, that might be just something that you want to choose based on what you're trying to achieve in your finished look. So let's put that back on the curve like it was to begin with. Then we can go ahead and close this down. Now at this point, it's good to show you that we don't need this curve anymore. Once we've done the actual placing it on the curve, I can delete that if I would like to. And the software will actually remember that the curve is there, and I can still use that shape if I would like to. I can also move my text around if I want to. Now also, I have complete control over this just like any other text element in the software. I can go in and change the kerning of my letters to make it spaced out nicer, so maybe they don't wrap over top of each other like they're doing down here, the A and the R. And I can space these out just like I could before until I get it just the way I want it to be. That looks okay. I can also go in and add more text to this if I'd like to. So if I wanted to add a little bit of text to this, you'll see that in the 2D view, it scales it down to fit on the line. And now if I don't want that like that, I can go ahead and delete that. Now you'll notice that the software doesn't scale it back up to its original height. So in order to do that, I need to close this down and then undo that with the Control Z. Now let's go ahead and show you how to wrap text onto a circle. Okay, to start off with, let's just delete this off of our job site. We don't need that text anymore, and we're going to need to have a circle. So let's draw a circle. We're going to make it 10 inches in diameter, and let's just click anywhere in here. We'll just drop it in there. Let's close that down. And then we're going to need some text. So let's go to our draw text box, and let's type in Vectric, and then enter, and then software. And that all looks fine. That looks good. And we'll just go ahead and close that down. And now we're going to need to break this up into two different lines, because what we want to do is we want to wrap Vectric across the top of this circle and software on the bottom of the circle. And we can't do that when it is two lines of the same text. So we need to right click on that, and we're going to break that text block into two different parts. And then we can just bring this Vectric up top and then software down below. Now the trick here is that we need to actually divide our circle in half, because we want the Vectric to start here and the software to start here. So it needs to go Vectric and then software. We need to have two separate lines because we can't really control where the text will land on this curve or on the circle, because we want it to be in that specific way with V here and S over here. If we wanted to, we could wrap Vectric software all the way around if we'd like to, but still we can't get the S pointing in the right direction over here. So to do that, we're going to select the circle. We're going to go into node mode, and we're going to take a look at this circle. You'll see that we have a start point at the top, and the arrow is pointing in this direction. So right now we just want to cut these two nodes here. So let's hover over them and right click and go down to cut vector. And then we can hover over this one, and we're going to, instead of right clicking, we're going to use C as our quick key. So now we're going to have two different line segments here, two different curves. We have one that goes from the left to the right upwards, and the other one goes from left to right downwards. And you'll see the start point. They share almost the same start point position in the end. So let's keep in mind that when you place text on a vector, on a curve, or anything like that, it always takes into account the start position. And my tip is that when you actually do this, make sure that you lay your text on the center of the line and then move it to the top or bottom, depending on what makes sense for you. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go back to our pick tool. We're going to pick the word software, hold down our shift key, grab this bottom part of the circle, and we'll wrap that on there. And you'll see what happens. Let's put it on the curve. So right now you see that it is going from left to right, which is perfectly fine. That's what we want. I've tested it on the curve, so I know the text is going in the right direction. And now I can just choose to go below. That's where I like it to be. And I'm going to give it a slight 1/4 inch offset to drop it down from that line. Then I'm going to close that down. In the same respect, I'm going to grab the Vectric, hold down my shift key, get that top part of that circle, go ahead and wrap it on there. Again, I'm going to wrap it on the curve to start out with, just to make sure everything is fine. If it was reversed, then you might want to try to use the other side option here, and that will reverse your text for you. But for me, it works out just perfectly fine. That's great. We're going to put it above that curve, and we're going to make it a 1/4 inch, just like the bottom. And then we'll click close. Now again, we can control this because it's still a text element. We can choose that text, and we can go ahead and adjust the kerning if we would like to make things nicer, maybe a little tighter if we would like in some spots. If we want to, we could go in and we could actually change the text. We could change the case if we want to. Vectric, if we'd like to, we can change the font if we want to for that, because it's a different piece of text now, and so on. We can do all kinds of different editing to it if we would like to. And there we go. Okay, let's just close that down. Control Z, back to the way it was. And I think that looks pretty slick just like that. Let's now have a look at some other different ways that we can transform our text. So let's grab all of these here just for the box selection, and we're going to delete all that. Let's go ahead and type in some new text. We'll type in the word Vectric. And that's fine, that's fine. We'll make it 3 inches tall. We'll close that down. With that selected, we'll just press F9 on the keyboard to center it. Like a lot of other vector elements, we can use our transform handles here to stretch our text up. We can squish it in and out. We can rotate it around and around if we would like to. And while we do that, we can still go in and edit our text because the software still considers this a text element. So I can go in here and I can add some information to this text. Let's go with limited, and you'll see that the software takes into account all the different transforms that we've done and will make this text look exactly like this original text. We're just editing this sort of modified font to fit our needs. So it works out really well. We can go ahead and add in software if we would like to, and you can see how it follows that same angle. It has the same transforms applied to it and so on. So that's pretty good and important to remember. So let's just go ahead and undo that. Back to the beginning again, right there. Okay, now let's have a look at how we can use our distortion tool here to really modify what text can look like. So with our text selected, we can go ahead and choose that. And you'll see we have 3 different options here. We can create an envelope or envelope distort our text based on a bounding box. We can go above a single curve, or we can go between 2 curves. And we'll look at this one here in a little bit. But for now, we're going to go with bounding box, and then we're going to choose to click apply. And you'll see what happens in our 2D view. Our Vectric text now has a bounding box around it. And you can treat this bounding box just like any other vector in our software. You can right click on that and you see you have some options here. We can also drag these nodes around and we can shape our box. And the software, as we change the size and the shape of the box, will distort our text to fit inside of that. Now if I right click on this span here, I can turn it to a Bezier, and I can go ahead and change the shape fit that way if I would like to. Now once I'm all done, I can just go ahead and select close. At this point, your text is not text anymore, and you won't be able to go in and use any of your text editing tools to change the spelling or to add new characters. And there you can see I now have my text is all distorted. Now if I want to go back in and maybe edit that distortion, I have 2 different ways I can do it. With that selected, I can go straight into node mode and it will bring up my bounding box and the handles again. Or what I can do is I can go from my pick tool straight back into the distortion tool again. And you'll see that I have the text selected, but then I'm going to need to choose edit envelope, and then I can go ahead and edit my envelope. Now once I'm done with my distortion, I can go ahead and choose to bake that. And once I bake it and close this down, you'll see that now these letters have become vectors. It's not a text element anymore. I can't do anything with the text part of it. I can't change the spelling, add text to it. But what I do have control of now is I can go into node mode and I can adjust my nodes if I would like to and change up my font even more. Great, so let's just go ahead now and delete that out of there. And let's look at distorting it between 2 curves. So to do that, we're going to need some new text again. And we'll click close, choose that, and we'll press F9 and center it in our job space. Now let's have a look at distorting our text between 2 curves. So let's go ahead and draw 2 curves. And for this, we're going to draw an arc. We're simply just going to draw in a quick little arc here. That will do the trick. That's perfect. Let's right click to get out of that. We're going to, with that selected, we're going to go ahead and mirror that. Flip about job center, create a mirrored copy, and we're going to flip vertically. Let's close that down. Now we're going to do, with that text selected, we're going to jump into our distort tool. And we're going to go ahead and choose between 2 curves. Hold down our shift key and add to that selection the bottom and then the top. And then we're going to go ahead and click apply. And there we have it. Now, you notice that my text is going in the right direction. There's a chance that if I had chosen my two vectors or my two arcs in the wrong order, the top one first and the bottom one, my text would be backwards and upside down. You always need to choose the base vector first, or the vector that you would like to have the bottom of your text flow along. So that worked out just perfect. Another thing you can do once you have it distorted is we can actually go ahead and change the envelope without destroying our original vector. So this is really great if you need to make some slight little tweaks, maybe because your font is a little bit funny, it doesn't quite fit within the your envelope like you want it to. So we can go ahead and make little changes like that. Then if we're all done, we can just close this down, and there we have it. So let's just go ahead and undo that back to where we had just our text. We don't need those two vectors either. Now let's have a look at distorting our text between two varied lines. Okay, so we're going to go over here to our draw curve. We'll just draw a quick curve like this. It's perfect. Right click to get out of that. Let's go again back to our mirrored selected objects tool. We're going to flip about job center, create a mirrored copy. We'll flip vertically, but then we're going to turn off create the mirrored copy, and we're going to flip it horizontally just to reverse it. So it looks like maybe like a flag. Then we'll close this down. Again, we're going to grab our Vectric text, jump into our distort object. We're going to choose between two lines. We're going to grab the bottom one first, and then the top one, click apply, and you'll notice that it's backwards. Well, that's because we had flipped this bottom curve here, and the start point is at the wrong end now. So to fix that, we're actually going to close this down, and we're going to undo this. I'm going to select this vector here. We're going to go into node mode, and we're going to right click on top of this node on the left hand side, and we're going to make this my start point. Now let's go ahead and go back to our pick tool, select our text, jump back into our distort object tool again. We're going to go between two lines, hold down our shift key, we'll grab this one and that one, click apply, and now you'll see that we've been distorted nicely between those two lines. And I can, again, go in and just slightly tweak my text if I need to, if I want to fit that on there perfectly, just to make sure that everything touches those lines if that's important for my design, or I can make some pretty major adjustments if I'd like to as well, depending on what I like to do. If I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and bake that distortion. I can close this down. I can delete those two lines if I'd like to. And if I'd like to, in the end, I can go ahead and select all of that, right click, and I can group that together. So now it's together as one group. It's not text. I can't edit it like text, but now I can move it around without mistakenly leaving centers of letters behind or full letters behind if I need to adjust or move the text around. And there we have it. And with that last example, we can complete this guide on how to create and edit text in the software. There are many tutorials available that cover all the tools that we have shown you in this tutorial with practical project examples, and I'll link to a few of those below in the related video section.